Hey, welcome back to Enthusiastically Optimistic. I'm your host, Steven. So this is a video I've wanted to make for a while now. How to draw better facial expressions. So I've done searches on the internet constantly, and what you often find when looking up tutorials is they teach you like the basic facial structure. You know how to set up everything using the Loomis method or the Asaro method or some other such tools. But you don't find as frequently videos on specifically how to draw facial expressions, how to improve on that. And so I want to make this video just kind of take you through a quick walkthrough of some things that have helped me in recent years. Because honestly, I've been around art, for my whole life, and I don't think some of these techniques I really realized or appreciated until like the last few months, to be honest with you. So let's get into it. So step one, so when you're looking at trying to improve your facial expressions, the key thing is to focus on three things. This area, a little bit of the nose is not as important, in the mouth. And I say this part is the most significant because you look at Bitmojis and they're able to express such a wide variety of emotions very easily. Where we as individuals, we look at it, we know immediately, regardless of what language we're from, what our background is, we look at it, we recognize it because the focus is on the eyes and not specifically the eyes themselves, but this shape involving the eyebrows. And one way to kind of mentally train yourself to identify it is look at superhero mask, specifically in The Incredibles. So just take a look at this picture of Mr. Incredible. His facial expression is indicated by this mask. You see that? It's showing exactly what his eyebrows are doing. So it gives um, so much emotion to it. Look at another example. I saved a couple of these I want to go through and show you before we start practicing. Another character from Incredibles, number two. Again, you're looking at one singular shape. And then if you look at it, basically the eyes are like inset into this, right? Something along those lines. And you have your eye shape, I want to say like your expression mask is a good way to think of it. And that expression mask carries so much weight in the face. Show you another example. I have a bunch here. Let's see. Here we go. Jack Jack. Again, he's excited, he's happy. How do we know that? Well, look at this. This exact shape. It carries everything, like so much of the facial emotion is in this shape. So you're trying to transfer that same idea when you look at a person, right? The cool thing too about looking at The Incredibles, looking at some animated movies, is there's also simplification. So again, focus on the eye mask and then simplification. When we're trying to draw believability, right? We sometimes get caught up in this idea that it has to be realistic. So we think about, shading and detail. No shading, no detail. Just focus on this shape, the mask shape, and then how can you very simply express the other features if you're going to draw the features, for example. Show you one more example. Well, I'll show you what a great thing to do too. Oh, this is just a great, expression sheet, and it shows so much of Mr. Incredible. You see this? Again, he's upset. There's this huge downturn where it's like the furrowed brow, right? Again here. But the expression is subtle, it's different. You see? Angry, so it's up and down. Surprised. That face mask is one of the simplest ways to convey emotion. And as you see, now let's look at this. Without the mask on, we can still trace it, right? Face mask, face mask, face mask. Furrowed brow here, face mask. So in every example, and that's why the Incredibles is when this artist, and I think his name is REIQ. I'll set a link below. But when he said this in his video, I was like, oh my goodness, that's so true. And so looking at the Incredibles is the best way to just look at like that face, that expression face mask essentially. On top of that, take a look at expression studies from animated movies like Disney, for example, because again, your goal is to learn how to simplify it. Do not get too complicated. We're going to put it into practice and we're going to look at real models. We're going to look at actual facial expressions and see, okay, can we somehow capture and transfer that? But when you look at the simplification of it, you're learning basically a way to visually notate an idea. That's what you see in Bitmoji so much. They visually notate this idea of what being angry or being upset or being confused or whatever. They figure out a way to do it. And so this expression study of this character from Big Hero 6, I love it because he's so expressive. And again, if we want to take a look, we can capture the face mask here. Same face mask, right? And then in dynamic angles, one side is always higher than the other. Dynamic face mask. Surprised and happy. Dynamic face mask. Miserable. Dynamic face mask. So each example, you're looking at the same thing over and over again. Now, this is a great one right here. It lets you focus on the actual emotion of the character without getting bogged down in details. So the facial mask, the expression face mask, and then look at examples of simplification because you're not looking at over, like for example, in this case, and I forgot the character's name. I'm sorry, I apologize. He has no lips, or basically very little indications for his lips. But that's okay. We're not sitting here confused as far as what his expressions are. It's clear. So that's one of the ways that we can improve. Look at the expression face mask, and then look at, like I said before, the simplification. Okay, so now we're going to test out our theories, right, on an actual model that we're looking at. So again, I'm just going to make sure I have my settings right for my drawing, sketch brush. Okay. So again, what we can start to do, right? Well, let me just walk you through it. Here, if we take a look at, go back to a different brush, hard round brush, right? If we simplify it into, okay, the Loomis method, right? It teaches you to break down the face into proportions, right? So you have your basic, your circular head, go down, you split it in half. Then you split it in half again, again, again. Sorry, those aren't quite accurate. Again and again. And then you cut off the sides basically. That breaks you down to a jaw area, something like that, right? So this line essentially is the eyebrow area. This line becomes the nose. This is the chin. These are equidistant, right? So the same distance between. And then you also can have your forehead area, the hairline. And so roughly, and this is not going to be completely accurate here, this space, and this space. And not in this example, not great, but they're all roughly equidistant. That's the basic breakdown. You can break down the face further, as you look at um, how you would set up everything else. The point is, when you're trying to focus on facial expression, don't worry about all this stuff. This is really just the structure. I'm not saying the structure isn't important because it is, but I want you to focus on simply like what is your goal? If your goal is to draw a facial expression, just focus on the eye mask, the nose, and the mouth. That's it. And again, you're not looking at drawing really complex things. So let's try this. So I'm looking at this person. I'm thinking about the line down the middle. If it's split in half, right? Down the middle, a line across, nose, mouth area. All right, so that's what I'm going to do when I first look at this. Line down the middle, cross, cross, and mouth. Right. That's the only thing I'm drawing right now. So now, this is just me. So I'm going to If I'm drawing in pencil, I'm just drawing this very lightly, right, as an indication. Now I'm looking at, okay, the part that I'm really trying to focus in on is her facial mask, right? It follows the course of the eyebrows. It kind of hooks in here. We have our eyeballs, hooks in, and goes across. Then the nose, like you see, is slightly tilted, and the mouth also is off. It's going to be off center because if the center line goes like right here, right? The mouth is off center because she's yawning. This part is flexible. So in my drawing, I'm going to do something very similar. First, I'm going to look at the eye mask. So like, I'm going to erase, first of all, some of these lines. Let's say, for example, this side of our face is slightly higher than the other side of our face. So eye mask is going to go up here, curve in, curve in, sphere, sphere, right? Nose is off center. So I'm just going to do a little bit of a for the nose, and also the mouth is off center. So I'm going to just do like a I'm trying to go into too much detail here, but you get the idea, right? And then, of course, another lesson we have to learn later on, we're going to talk more about the eyes. I use spheres. I always draw the eyes as spheres. I know there's different techniques involved, but once you draw the eye as a sphere, you can then just kind of draw on top of it. So again, once you draw the eye as a sphere, and we'll talk about this a little bit in a different video. So basically, my basic workflow is you draw the eye. You're thinking about the eyeball itself, right? Then on top of that, with opacity, or draw very lightly. Now on top of that, you're gonna draw the eyelid, and it's going to wrap fully around the eyeball. That way, whether you're looking up, down, if your eye's looking up, these are not great. But whatever direction your eye happens to be looking in, that's not good at all. But you get the idea, right? It's wrapping around. So it helps you maintain the three-dimensionality of the object. So, and that's all, again, that'll be another video. The point that we're looking at right now, though, is the facial expressions. Let's do one more quick one. So this is a crazy face, right? Real crazy. Again, to start off with, what are we looking at? If you first look, you may think that's crazy complex. Like, how do we draw something that detailed? Again, think about if you're split into those sections, right? Loomis method, yeah, across the eye and the mouth, right? That would be normal because there's movement going on in the face. Remember, all the details of your face move. There's the eye mask expression area. Your nose goes from side to side and kind of goes off center, as does your mouth constantly. So if you want to do better facial expressions, don't make a person and everything stuck in place. Make that face move. Put things off center basically. It adds to the expression. So here, like this, a simplification would be like, okay, this is the mouth here, the nose, and facial expressions, the eyes, something like that, right? And so if we remove this, we get the basic facial expression. Okay, so let's keep going. First, I want to apologize. If you look back at the video, I had some weird artifacts going on with my background and my eyes and everything. So I apologize for any weird distractions. But let's keep going. So now let's just do some rapid fire examples. Let's see. So we're gonna get rid of this stuff. Okay. So great example here. Okay. Again, step one. Step one should be to get the right brush to draw with. Okay. Okay. Again, we're just doing the basic breakdown. Things we're keeping in mind. Again, the eyebrows, the spheres or the ball of the eye. Remember, it takes it up some space. You can do the bridge. Her nose is pretty much in the center. And then the mouth, right? It's slightly off key. Sorry, slightly off center, I should say. So we're going to do like this. And there, you want to keep in mind three-dimensional forms when you're looking at things like the mouth. And so I'm just doing it kind of quickly now, without too much detail. But that way you can really add some dimension to things that you're drawing, give it some volume, and make it stand out. So man, a little too much detail right here, I admit. Just kind of make it work. Then of course you're adding a few details in the eye. So because her eyes are so wide open, we can go ahead, corner of the eye, wrap it around, and draw a little bit of the eyelid here. Again, the under eyelid as well. Same thing over here. Wraps around. Eyelid. Pupil. Then we make it wrap just a little bit, right? And again, we're not really going for a lightness at this point. We're just trying to focus on the expression itself. You can always darken in the eyebrows a little bit. So again, these are not the best example, honestly, but that's a rough example, right? So we're gonna take that, shrink it down, and move on to the next one. Okay. So next, let's pick another one. Zoom out. Let's see. Well, let's do this one. So like we said before, you have the basic structure going on right here. I lower the opacity a little bit. Right. And you notice the face can scrunch up or elongate. So you want to keep that in mind when you're drawing your guiding lines. Again, just do your 3 lines. And now this is going to be scrunched up, so we want to imply that. So first line across, second line, third line is just going to be very much like it's scrunched up, right? So now again, we go to the eyebrows. Eyebrows aren't doing much here, just kind of plain and simple. So I'm just going to do a normal arc across, go to the side here. And all this implies that this area is almost like it's inset. And so the eyes are inside of this section because of the way your skull is set up. We have our eyeballs here. And again, not every artist does this, but I always love to make sure I draw the eyeballs. The nose is here. There's a little shape design here. The way I draw the nose, it depends if I'm just trying to simplify. Like he has a pretty bulbous nose or very round, so I may add these details here. Then technically it would go something like this. If I'm looking at the three-dimensional forms involved. So you see all this as a three-dimensionality to the eye, right? And then of course the lips. Typically we just do the center line first. Then his underlip, which is off center. And that adds to making the facial expression a little bit more dynamic because it is off center. And then something like that, right? And then of course you go back in with the eyes. Again, this line also there's kind of as the center point of the eyes. So I can take that line and draw it out a little bit, go across. And very wrinkly eyes. See this? Then of course we can always add some more of these wrinkles across to imply or indicate his age. Like I said, I'm not trying to do too much detail, but again, this is an older guy. So you have a facial expression here. Each time we do this, and there's so much we can go into in terms of facial structure and all that good stuff. But when you're practicing facial expressions, just focus on the eye mask area, the nose. Is it down the center line or is it offset a little bit? Same thing with the mouth. The mouth is going to be a more extreme version of being offset because, like, just look at it. You can move your mouth upper and lower, and especially the jaw, in so many different ways. You can really maneuver things. And so, if you're trying to make it dynamic, definitely make things offset. You don't want symmetry is the enemy of something being dynamic. So when the eyebrows are both flat and straight across, the pose is going to look more boring. However, when you have like that, those dynamic movements of the eyebrows, just like with the mask of For the Incredibles we saw, it's going to definitely give it more energy, more motion to it. Same thing with the nose. Again, the nose, you're just going to basically be leaning one way or the other, or it's going to be straight on. The mouth, however, you have a lot that you can do with the lips. And so it's going to be rotating and moving along that center axis, either to the right or to the left, a little bit more up, down, squash, stretch, all those things. So the face is very dynamic. So if you want to make it dynamic things, again, Focus on the face mask. Face mask, nose and mouth, but amazing face mask I think is your key. And then look at simplified versions of this in, dynamic character expression studies from like Disney films and things like that. And then practice. I mean, my go-to is basically go to Pinterest and do a search and create a board for myself, and then just save any good facial expression I see, and then then just practice, find good. And this is where I found these on Pinterest. And let's try this. This is a great one. I don't know if that's Gal Gadot or not, but it looks kind of like her. Um, but let's try that one. Okay, so we'll deselect. Okay, so again, this is a great example. If you look at just like there's a plumb line, for example, one more time, we're looking right down the center of her face. Sorry. And how do I know this is center? Look at the space between the eyebrows here and here. So that's maybe a little bit off center, but that's roughly the center. And so you're looking at on this side, you have the entire eyeball here, eyeball here. Usually I arc the eyebrow here, and then this part. Again, you have this fantastic face mask again. Now look at the nose. It's off center because her mouth is moving. And speaking of 3D forms, I'm going to do a video on this, but if you look at 3D forms, again, when I draw, I typically do this shape. My nose, but I'm keeping it really simple. That's my nose. Now, when I want to add the details to it and put the 3D forms together, this is what I do. That is your nose. And then, same thing for the mouth. Honestly, you have this shape going on from your nostrils down to your mouth, to your chin, basically. And then you have a separate spot here for your chin. Now, your mouth wraps around this area. So if you want to be very technical about it, you're going to wrap around the mouth, and then you can always add the lips on top of that, but you're thinking three-dimensionally. And so when you have that in mind, you don't necessarily have to draw the structure, but you have these things in mind in terms of like your mouth is on. Let me just demonstrate that for you. So that part of your mouth, let's see, is like this. So you have your face mask that we talked about, and I'm just going to do a very generic one right now. I'm not doing this based on the picture. You have your face mask, right? And this can be manipulated any way you want to. Your nose will go down here. This is a 3D shape of your nose, right? Without any of the anatomical details, or something along those lines, right? Now, where the nostrils would be around this area, this is also where you'd have this form. And so from the side, it would look something like this, but it's a three-dimensional form. So things wrap around it. So wrap this way, or perhaps this way around it in terms of your lips. So these are the forms that we have in mind while we're drawing the face and drawing the facial expression specifically. Okay, so now that we have a fundamental understanding of like the breakdown, let's give this pose a try. So Get my drawing tools ready. Right. So we've already established that things are going to be slightly off center because of our facial expression. Now we can go in and we can do the eye mask facial expression, or the facial expression mask, as I like to call it. Then we'll do the eyeballs. Then we'll do the cerebellum is what it's called. And I like again to start with the bottom shape of the nose. This also indicates that things are slightly off center for her. We can carry on the whole shape if we like, the three-dimensional shape if we want to. And then of course, since this is the shape we're looking at here, the vertical line comes down from the bottom area of the nose, something like this, right? So now we're just going to do the shape we see here. We're going to do the center line here. It curves around. We'll do the bottom lip, same thing. So we have everything all centered. And so that's going to, again, it adds to a much more dynamic look for your drawing, for your illustration, for your facial expression. And then, of course, we could go in and, again, actually wrap around the eyelid. That's the thing you want to keep in mind. We're not simply drawing random shapes for the eyes. We're trying to figure out, okay, what shape, how do I make the right shape for the eye? Because I've seen videos in which they talk about, like, oh, it's similar to a fish, the shape of a fish or something like that. And I'm not saying those techniques don't work, because they can. It depends on what you're going for. But if you want to add believability to your illustration, my biggest encouragement is to focus on the three-dimensional underlying structures. So I want to show you, I'm going to actually finish this off a little bit more for you because we haven't really seen much of it. So literally when you're doing the structure, you're doing the facial expression, all that good stuff. Right now, all we're looking at is the simple underlying structure. Now, this is great if you're just practicing. But if you want to create more of a finished look, we would go back in and we would add a little bit more detail here. So now we're really just outlining. Sorry. Let's go back. Okay, here we go. Now we're just going back and we're adding more detail And essentially, if you're using traditional drawing tools, all you're doing at this point is going through and using either a darker pencil, a pen, and you're just choosing the lines that you want to keep and focus on. The rest of them, they kind of go by the wayside. So trying to keep it relatively simple. So we're just picking and choosing what areas we really want to maintain for this character. So whenever you watch, one of those master illustrators like Kim Jong-ji, I think is his name. It's those amazing illustrators, and you don't see any of the construction aspects of their drawing. All you see is the finished product. This is still what's going on behind the scenes. This is still what's going on inside their heads as they draw. They have all these things clearly in mind, but because they're so masterfully doing this for so long, it's really easy for them to skip all that stuff and go straight to the good stuff or the details. So if you're doing like comic style or I'm going to go and shade this. I don't have to, but I'm just going to shade that right now. Actually, we'll get rid of that. So then I can go back in and erase that. And I have a decent facial expression here, right? You can add more details if you want to really exaggerate things. But for the most part, we have the eyes, the nose, we have all the major details going on. I erased a little too much. Okay, so go back here. Add a few more details to the nose, not much. Just another to indicate the planal shifts of the nose. And now if we get rid of the background stuff, we have a decent facial expression here. And of course, again, we're not looking at any major things in terms of we're not looking at her forehead, we're not looking at her cheeks, anything, but the center focus of the facial expression, and it's all intact right here. And again, at this stage, you're just picking and choosing what lines you're going to keep, what lines you're not going to keep, all that good stuff. But this is our basic workflow. We focus in on the face mask, the nose, how off-centered it happens to be, and then the lips. And then we go back in after we're basically done with everything, and we can add a little bit of detail, just focusing on what things do we want to keep. We don't need all the construction lines anymore. We have our facial expression. So that wraps up this video. It turned out to be a little bit longer than I was expecting. More of a deep dive into the whole process behind improving and what to focus on when doing your facial expression studies. So the next couple of videos will probably just be some studies myself, going through the process, applying what we've talked about today in actual practice. Probably just choose maybe one celebrity. Amelia Clark is great. She has great, eyebrow expression, eyebrow movement. So to draw her is great practice. Scarlett Johansson is another good one. So there's some great celebrities out there and other people, random facial expression sheets you can find to practice with. So definitely get your drawing pad out, get your notebook out, or you work digitally, whatever the case is, just get to it and try to improve your facial expression studies. All right. Until next time, stay enthusiastically optimistic.